Manx Museum is 100 years old this year. It is home to an extraordinary collection of artefacts and archives that help tell the story of the Isle of Man and its people. To celebrate our centenary, we have curated a special exhibition and podcast, Museum 100, which will feature a kaleidoscope of treasures from our collections. Hello, I'm Katie King, Curator of Art and Social History for Manx National Heritage. Today I'm going to talk about a 19th century portrait from our collection, which until recently was simply titled Mrs. John Quayle. The portrait was painted by artist Henry Barber of Derby in 1826. The portrait shows a beautiful young woman in her mid-20s, with dark hair carefully styled into a fashionable updo. She looks directly at the viewer with a kind expression. She is finely dressed in a dark blue-green gown, possibly made of velvet, with a white lace trim. She wears golden dangly earrings and a gold chain, and she is clearly from a wealthy family. The portrait has been in the National Art Collections at the Manx Museum since the 1950s, alongside a portrait of her husband, Mr. John Quayle MHK. Whilst we have information about the life of Mr. John Quayle, there was no information at all about his wife. There was simply a handwritten note stating that the donor of the painting wanted the Manx Museum to know that the family described the portrait as being a very striking likeness of her. As we wanted to put the portrait on display for our Museum 100 exhibition, we decided to discover a little more about the woman behind the canvas and share her story. It can be difficult to discover much tangible information about the lives of individual women from this period. They often appear as a side note in the male protagonist's story, simply known as Mrs. This or Mother Two. But with some careful digging, we've been able to piece together a little more about the life of Mrs. John Quayle. She was Miss Margaret Frizzle Tellett, born in 1799 to a Manx family based in Lozère. She married a wealthy merchant, John Quayle, and they lived together in Rushen House in Castletown. John Quayle went on to be a member of the House of Keys, a politician. This in itself reveals something about the social status and wealth of the family, as the House of Keys was a self-elected body at this time. This meant that you had to be connected to a family of significance to get a seat in the House, or you had to be filthy rich. We don't know which was the case for John Quayle, possibly both. Little is known about the life Margaret would have lived as a wealthy woman on the Isle of Man in the 19th century, although life in Castletown at this time was rather lively, being the centre of politics and high society during a period of cosmopolitan extravagance, for some at least. The quality of the portrait itself, and that of her husband, certainly indicates a high social status. Towards the middle of the 19th century, Margaret does appear from time to time in the Manx newspapers, especially towards the end of her life as a wealthy widow. She appeared to be well known for her charitable and philanthropic work. She died in 1879, and her obituary in the newspaper stated that many of the poor of Castletown came out to watch her funeral carriage drive past, in remembrance of all the good deeds she had done. It also reveals that two of their sons died in war. William Quayle died in the Sikh War of 1845, and his brother died during the Crimean War in the 1850s. Whilst we will never know the full story of Margaret's life, it is wonderful to be able to piece together a little more about the people behind our portrait collection, and to give her back her name, Mrs. Margaret Quayle.